Welcome back to the channel, where we talk about the most valuable and collectible coins you can find. Today we're focusing on Roosevelt 1 dimes, a coin that many people overlook, but that can actually be worth much more than 10 cents. In this video, I'll walk you through the history of the Roosevelt dime, the different years and mint marks that collectors search for, and why some of these dimes can be surprisingly valuable. Make sure you stay with me until the very end, because I'll be sharing details about rare Roosevelt dimes that could be hiding in your pocket change right now. If you skip even a part of this video, you might miss out on the key information that tells you which Roosevelt dimes are worth real money. And before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you'll always be the first to know about the most valuable coins, the rarest finds, and the hidden treasures in U.S. coinage. Let's get started. First up, the 1978 Roosevelt 1 dime with no mint mark is a coin that many people have seen countless times without realizing its potential value. At first glance, it might just look like an ordinary 10-cent coin, but collectors know that certain Roosevelt dimes from 1978 can be worth far more than face value. When you hear the words 1978 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark, you might not think it's a rare or valuable coin. But the truth is that these coins can be surprisingly collectible and are always in demand among U.S. coin enthusiasts. The Roosevelt dime itself has an important place in American coinage history. First issued in 1946 to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt, this dime replaced the mercury dime and became one of the most circulated coins in the United States. By 1978, the design had already been in circulation for over 30 years, and yet many people still overlook the details that make certain Roosevelt dimes, like the 1978 no mint mark coin, stand out as valuable pieces worth saving. Now, the 1978 Roosevelt 1 dime with no mint mark was minted at the Philadelphia Mint. Coins produced in Philadelphia during this time usually did not carry a mint mark, and that is why you won't see a P on this coin. For collectors, the absence of a mint mark tells the story of where it came from, and because mint marks can play such a big role in determining rarity and value, the no mint mark version of the 1978 dime is always interesting to study. While billions of dimes were struck in 1978, collectors know that condition, strike quality, and survival rate all affect the long-term value of these coins. Many people ask, why would a 1978 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark be considered valuable? The answer comes down to a combination of history, collector demand, and the simple fact that coins in higher grades are much harder to find today. Most of the 1978 dimes were spent in circulation, passed from hand to hand, and used for everyday transactions. As a result, the majority of these dimes show heavy wear. Finding one in exceptional condition, with sharp details and original luster, is much more challenging, and that is what gives these coins their collectible value. The Roosevelt dime series also has a strong following among coin collectors. Many people build complete sets of Roosevelt dimes, year by year, mint mark by mint mark, and that means they need a 1978 no mint mark dime to complete the collection. Even if it's a common date, the demand is always there. But when a coin is in pristine condition, uncirculated, or even has a full band's designation on the torch, the value can climb much higher than most people expect. That's why it's important not to underestimate the 1978 Roosevelt 1 dime with no mint mark coin. Collectors often point out that Roosevelt dimes are not just about silver. Earlier dimes from 1946 to 1964 were struck in 90% silver, but by 1978, the composition had already changed to a copper-nickel clad. Even though the 1978 dime has no silver content, it is still collectible and can be valuable because of its condition and collector demand. Many people assume that only silver dimes have value, but this is not true. Modern clad dimes like the 1978 Roosevelt dime can absolutely have premium value, especially in high grades or with strong strike details. Another important factor in the value of the 1978 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark is historical context. By the late 1970s, inflation and economic changes meant that coins were used heavily in circulation. Most people didn't bother to save dimes from this period, which means that far fewer examples were put aside in brand new condition. Collectors today know that finding a high-grade 1978 dime with no mint mark is much tougher than it sounds, and that's exactly why it can bring a strong price compared to face value. Think about it this way. If you had a jar of coins from the late 1970s, most of the dimes inside would show heavy wear. But if you came across one that looked fresh, with clean surfaces and original shine, that coin would immediately stand out as something worth keeping. That is exactly why the 1978 Roosevelt dime, with no mint mark, has become an important coin for collectors to pay attention to. Over the years, many coin collectors have realized that undervalued modern dimes can become tomorrow's treasures. The Roosevelt dime series has been collected for decades, and coins like the 1978 no mint mark dime are perfect examples of why even a 10-cent coin can have real collectible value. Every collector wants to have a complete set, and every collector appreciates a well-preserved example from 1978. The details of the design also make this coin special. On the obverse, you have the portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt, designed by John R. Sinek, which has remained on the dime since 1946. On the reverse, you see the torch, olive branch, and oak branch, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. When you look closely at a 1978 dime in high grade, the sharpness of these details really stands out, and collectors know that full strikes add to the overall value. Now, let's talk about why you should always check your change for coins like this. While the majority of 1978 dimes with no mint mark will only be worth face value, the rare ones in high grades are worth saving. Collectors are willing to pay premiums for coins that are nearly flawless. If you ever come across a 1978 dime that looks unusually clean or shiny, don't spend it. Set it aside. These coins may not make you rich overnight, but they do represent real value above face, and over time, their worth can increase as demand for collectible Roosevelt dimes continues to grow. Remember, the value of coins is not just about rarity. It's also about condition, historical significance, and collector interest. The 1978 Roosevelt dime, with no mint mark, has all three. It's a coin from an important era in U.S. history. It's part of one of the most collected coin series in the country, and in top condition. It can be worth much more than 10 cents. That's why this coin is not only collectible, but also valuable. So the next time you come across a 1978 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark, take a closer look. Check its condition, study the details, and remember that this coin could be worth holding on to. Even though billions were made, not all of them survived in great condition, and collectors always need well-preserved examples. That is why the 1978 Roosevelt one dime with no mint mark deserves attention, and why it is a valuable coin that every collector should know about. Next up, the 1990 Roosevelt one dime with the D mint mark is one of those coins that people often overlook, but it's actually an important and valuable part of U.S. coinage history. At first glance, the 1990 dime looks like any other coin you might find in pocket change. But collectors know that when we're talking about the 1990 Roosevelt one dime with the D mint mark, we're talking about a collectible coin that holds more value than just 10 cents. That's why in this video, we're going to dive deep into the history, the details, and the value of this coin, and why you should always pay attention when you see a 1990 Roosevelt dime with the Denver mint mark. The Roosevelt dime has been a cornerstone of American coinage since 1946, created to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt after his passing. Designed by John R. Sinek, this coin has stood the test of time with the same obverse and reverse design still in use today. By 1990, the dime had already been in circulation for over 4 decades, but collectors still look closely at coins like the 1990 Roosevelt dime with D mint mark because they can be valuable in the right condition. The D mint mark tells us that the coin was minted in Denver. While both Philadelphia and Denver produced large numbers of dimes in 1990, collectors know that mint marks play a big role in the identity and collectability of coins. The Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of these dimes, but the number of coins that survive today in pristine, uncirculated condition is much smaller. That's exactly why the 1990 Roosevelt dime with the D mint mark can be considered valuable. Now, let's talk about why condition is everything when it comes to these coins. The majority of 1990 Roosevelt dimes with D Mintmark were used in everyday commerce. They went through cash registers, vending machines, and countless transactions. Most of them have heavy wear, scratches, and faded details. But when you find one that still has its original luster, sharp details on Roosevelt's portrait, and crisp strike on the reverse torch, oak, and olive branches, you've found something special. Collectors will always pay more for high-grade coins, and that's why the 1990 Roosevelt dime with D mintmark can bring much more than face value in top condition. Even though these dimes are clad coins, made of copper and nickel rather than silver, that does not mean they lack value. A lot of people assume that only silver dimes are worth collecting, but that simply isn't true. The 1990 Roosevelt dime with D mintmark proves that modern clad dimes can be highly collectible. Collectors who want a complete set of Roosevelt dimes need one from 1990 D, and they especially want examples that are nearly flawless. That steady demand is what drives the value of this coin higher than 10 cents. Another key point is how the survival of high-quality coins affects scarcity. Billions of coins may have been minted, but very few survive in top condition because most were immediately put into circulation. That's what makes the 1990 Roosevelt one dime with D mintmark valuable today. Coins in mint state grades are far scarcer than worn ones, and collectors are willing to pay a premium for them. Let's not forget about strike quality. On Roosevelt dimes, collectors often look at the torch on the reverse and pay attention to the details of the horizontal and vertical lines. A strong strike with full details can make a 1990 D dime more desirable, and when you add that to excellent condition, the value can increase significantly. Now, imagine searching through your pocket change, a jar of old coins, or even rolls of dimes from the bank, and suddenly finding a 1990 Roosevelt dime with a D mintmark that looks brand new. That single coin could be worth far more than face value, and it's exactly the kind of treasure that coin collectors are always on the hunt for. That's why it's so important to check your change carefully and never assume that modern dimes have no value. The design itself continues to capture attention. On the obverse is Roosevelt's portrait with the word Liberty and the motto, "In God We Trust," while the reverse features the famous Torch of Liberty, flanked by the olive branch of peace and the oak branch of strength. When you see these design details sharply defined on a 1990 Roosevelt dime with D mintmark, it's a strong sign of quality, and quality means value. Collectors often stress that coins like the 1990 D Roosevelt dime may not seem rare now, but as time goes on, well-preserved examples become harder and harder to find. That means their value can continue to grow. Modern collectors are already setting aside high-grade clad dimes because they know the future market will reward those who thought ahead. The 1990 Roosevelt one dime with D mintmark fits that category perfectly. Common at face value, but valuable in great condition. This coin also represents a piece of U.S. history. The year 1990 was a time of change and transition, and coins from this era are now over 3 decades old. While it doesn't feel like ancient history, the reality is that coins from the 1990s are aging, and collectors are already beginning to recognize their place in modern numismatic history. That's another reason the 1990 Roosevelt dime with D mintmark is valuable. It connects everyday pocket change with the bigger story of America's economy and coinage. So, whether you're a serious collector or just someone who enjoys checking their change, the 1990 Roosevelt dime with D mintmark is a coin you should always pay attention to. It may look small and ordinary, but it carries value, history, and collectability. And if you find one in top condition, you'll be holding a coin that is far more valuable than its face value of 10 cents. The bottom line is this: the 1990 Roosevelt one dime with the D mintmark coin is valuable. It's part of one of the most widely collected coin series in the United States. It represents the history of the Denver Mint, and it's a coin that can bring strong premiums when found in excellent condition. That's why collectors want it. That's why you should look for it. And that's why this coin deserves a place in every collection. Next up, the 1973 Roosevelt one dime with no mintmark is one of those coins that most people overlook because it blends in so well with everyday change. People see it, spend it, and move on, never realizing that it has collectible and valuable qualities that make it more than just a 10-cent coin. The truth is, the 1973 Roosevelt dime without a mint mark is a coin that every collector should know about, because while it may not be made of silver, it still carries real value when preserved in the right condition. To understand why the 1973 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark is valuable, we need to take a step back into history. The Roosevelt dime series was first released in 1946, designed by John R. Sinnock to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt after his death in 1945. Roosevelt was deeply connected to the March of Dimes, a campaign that raised money to fight polio, so it was fitting that the dime was chosen to carry his portrait. By 1973, this design had already been circulating for nearly 3 decades, and while it had become a familiar sight to Americans, it still had significance in U.S. coinage. The specific coin we're talking about today, the 1973 Roosevelt 1 dime with no mint mark, was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. At that time, Philadelphia did not put a mint mark on its coins. That's why you'll see no letter under the date. Denver dimes carried a D, and San Francisco struck-proof coins with an S. But the absence of a mint mark tells us this dime was made in Philadelphia. This detail may seem small, but to collectors, mint marks are crucial. They identify where a coin was made, and they also play a role in rarity, demand, and value. Now, the Philadelphia Mint struck hundreds of millions of these dimes in 1973, and most of them went directly into circulation. They were used in grocery stores, gas stations, laundromats, vending machines, and everywhere else small change was needed. Because of that, most of the surviving 1973 Roosevelt dimes with no mint mark today are heavily worn. They show flattened details on Roosevelt's face, scratches, discoloration, and nicks from years of use. This is where value comes in. Collectors know that condition is everything. A worn example might only be worth face value, but when you find a 1973 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark in pristine, uncirculated condition, that's when it becomes valuable. Coins with sharp details, strong strikes, and original luster are far scarcer than circulated ones. Collectors will pay premiums for coins in mint state grades, especially if they have features like fully struck torch lines on the reverse. This is one of the main reasons why the 1973 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark is valuable. Some people make the mistake of thinking that only silver dimes are worth saving. While it's true that Roosevelt dimes from 1946 to 1964 were 90% silver, by 1973 the coins were made of copper-nickel clad. But that does not mean they are worthless. The 1973 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark proves that modern clad coins can be collectible and valuable, particularly in high grades. Collectors who build complete Roosevelt dime sets need every date and mint mark combination, including this one, so demand is always present. Another factor that makes the 1973 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark valuable is survival rate. When billions of coins are minted, most people assume they will always be easy to find. But what really matters is how many survive in top condition. In 1973, very few people set aside rolls of dimes straight from the bank. Most were spent right away. That means only a limited number of pristine coins remain today. As time passes, the number of well-preserved 1973 no mint mark dimes becomes smaller, and scarcity pushes value upward. Let's take a closer look at the design. On the obverse, we see Franklin D. Roosevelt facing left, with the word Liberty along the rim and the motto, "In God We Trust," below his chin. The date 1973 is placed near the bottom, with no mint mark visible, a clear sign that the coin came from Philadelphia. The initials JS, standing for John Sinnock, appear on the neck. On the reverse, the design features the Torch of Liberty at the center, symbolizing freedom, with an olive branch on the left representing peace, and an oak branch on the right representing strength and independence. The Latin motto, E pluribus unum, runs across the middle. When these details are fully struck and sharply defined, they make the 1973 Roosevelt dime, with no mint mark, far more appealing to collectors, and therefore more valuable. Now, let's talk about why collectors specifically chase coins like this. The Roosevelt dime series has a loyal following because it has been in circulation for so long and is still in use today. Collectors enjoy building full date and mintmark sets, starting from 1946 all the way through modern years. The 1973 no mintmark dime is one of the coins needed to complete such a set. While common in lower grades, examples in mint state condition are far more difficult to find, and that's where the true value lies. Imagine finding a 1973 Roosevelt dime with no mintmark that still looks as if it just left the mint. Bright, reflective surfaces, sharp details on Roosevelt's hair and face, and clear, strong lines on the reverse torch. That coin is not just a dime. It is a collectible piece that could be worth several times its face value. This is why collectors and dealers actively search for high-grade examples of the 1973 dime with no mintmark. The historical context also plays an important role. By the early 1970s, the United States had already transitioned away from silver coinage, and people were adjusting to a new era of clad coinage. Inflation was changing how money was used, and coins were being spent more heavily than ever. That means dimes from 1973 lived hard lives in circulation. The fact that some survived in pristine condition makes them all the more valuable today. When people ask, is the 1973 Roosevelt dime with no mintmark worth anything? The answer is yes. While circulated examples may not bring much, high-grade coins are absolutely valuable. The market for collectible Roosevelt dimes continues to grow, and modern clad coins are becoming more appreciated. Collectors today know that setting aside coins like this is an investment for the future. It's also important to remember that valuable coins don't always stand out at first glance. A 1973 dime with no mintmark may look like any other dime in your pocket, but the difference comes down to grade, strike, and overall condition. That's why coin collectors carefully inspect their change, searching for hidden treasures like this. The bottom line is clear. The 1973 Roosevelt 1 dime with no mintmark coin is valuable. It's valuable because it's part of a historic and popular coin series. It's valuable because condition makes a huge difference. And it's valuable because collectors need it to complete their sets. Even though billions were minted, very few survive today in the kind of condition that collectors want, and that scarcity drives up value. So, the next time you see a dime from 1973 without a mintmark, don't dismiss it as just 10 cents. Take a closer look. It could be a valuable collectible that connects you to American history and the legacy of Franklin D. Roosevelt. The 1973 Roosevelt dime with no mintmark is proof that even modern clad coins can hold real value, and it deserves a place of honor in any collection. Next up, the 1987 Roosevelt 1 dime with the D mintmark is a coin that many people overlook, but collectors and coin enthusiasts know that even modern dimes can carry surprising value depending on their condition, minting details, and rarity. The dime series has been a part of American coinage history since 1946, honoring President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was a symbol of leadership during the Great Depression and World War II. His image was chosen for the dime as a tribute to his efforts in founding the March of Dimes, a campaign that fought polio and eventually helped in the development of a vaccine. The dime is small, but its place in U.S. history is significant. Now, when we look specifically at the 1987 Roosevelt 1 dime with the D mintmark, we are talking about a coin struck at the Denver Mint. The Denver Mint has produced billions of coins over the years, and 1987 was no exception. However, what makes the 1987 D Roosevelt dime interesting is that while it might seem like just another coin in circulation, collectors know that even coins from the 1980s can become valuable depending on specific factors. These factors include rarity, surviving condition, and whether the coin has any errors or unique features that set it apart from the ordinary examples. One of the first things collectors consider is the mintage number. In 1987, the Denver Mint produced a very large number of dimes. Because of this, most examples of the 1987 D Roosevelt dime are common in circulated condition. They are usually only worth face value if they are worn down from years of use. However, when you find a coin that has been preserved in mint state condition, with no scratches, no wear, and a sharp strike, the value increases significantly. Collectors are willing to pay more for coins that appear just as they did when they left the mint. The next factor that plays an important role is errors and varieties. Era coins are always in demand among collectors, and the 1987 Roosevelt dime with the D mint mark is no exception. Some examples may have striking errors, such as off-center strikes, double dies, or other minting mistakes. These errors make the coin unique, and uniqueness drives value in the world of coin collecting. For example, an off-center dime where part of the design is missing because it was struck incorrectly can be worth much more than a regular dime. Similarly, a double die coin where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled can command a premium in the marketplace. The 1987 D dime is made of a copper-nickel clad composition, which has been standard for U.S. dimes since 1965. While it does not contain silver, like the earlier Roosevelt dimes minted from 1946 to 1964, that does not mean it has no value to collectors. Silver coins have intrinsic metal value, but modern clad coins can still be highly collectible if they are rare in condition or carry special minting errors. Collectors understand that as time goes on, coins from the 1980s and 1990s are slowly disappearing from circulation, especially in high grades, because most have been heavily used and show significant wear. Let's also consider the role of grading. While we are not talking about grading services here, it is important to understand that the condition of the coin makes all the difference in determining its value. A 1987 D Roosevelt dime in average circulated condition may not be worth more than 10 cents, but in uncirculated condition, especially in higher mint state levels, it can be worth more to serious collectors who are building complete sets. The better the condition, the higher the demand, and the higher the demand, the more valuable the coin becomes. It is also important to note that collectors often seek to complete a full Roosevelt dime collection, which means they need examples from every year and every mint. This includes the 1987 Roosevelt 1 dime with the D mint mark. For someone who is missing this coin in high condition, they may be willing to pay a premium to add it to their collection. That is where the value of a coin like this really comes into play. Now, let's talk more about errors because this is one of the areas where hidden value can really be found. Imagine you find a 1987 D Roosevelt dime that looks different from the others in your change. Maybe the lettering looks doubled, maybe the edge is slightly off, or maybe the coin appears misaligned. These details can indicate that the coin is an error variety, and collectors actively search for such coins. A normal dime might only be worth face value, but a dime with a dramatic error could be worth dollars, sometimes even hundreds, depending on the type of error and its rarity. Another point to think about is the survival rate of coins. While millions were minted in Denver in 1987, how many have survived in excellent condition? The answer is far fewer than you might think. Most have been used for decades in daily transactions, scratched, dented, and worn down. Finding a bright, clean, sharp-struck 1987 D dime is not as easy as it sounds, and that scarcity in high grades helps push its value higher in the eyes of collectors. The 1987 D dime also holds sentimental value for some people. Coins from the 1980s are now over 35 years old, and for many collectors, they represent a piece of their childhood or a connection to the past. Nostalgia can play a big role in coin collecting, and that emotional connection often translates into financial value. As you listen to this, remember that the 1987 Roosevelt 1 dime with the D mint mark is not just a tiny coin. It is a valuable piece of U.S. coinage history. It tells the story of the Denver Mint, of Roosevelt's legacy, and of the collectors who seek out even the smallest details to build complete and valuable sets. Every dime has the potential to be more than just 10 cents, and the 1987 D dime is a perfect example of how a modern coin can carry hidden worth. So, if you ever come across a 1987 Roosevelt dime with the D mint mark, don't ignore it. Check it carefully. Look for condition, look for errors, and understand that this coin is part of a larger story in American numismatics. Whether you are a beginner or an advanced collector, knowing the details of coins like this one can help you uncover treasures that most people overlook. The next time you sort through your change, remember that valuable coins are not only from the 1800s or early 1900s. Even coins from the 1980s, like the 1987 Roosevelt 1 dime with the D mint mark, can surprise you with their value. And that is why this coin is truly worth paying attention to. That brings us to the end of today's look at valuable U.S. coins, including Roosevelt dimes, Washington quarters, wheat pennies, and many more coins that most people don't realize can actually be worth far more than their face value. Every coin tells a story, and every coin in your pocket change has the potential to be valuable if you know what to look for. If you enjoyed learning about these coins, then you definitely won't want to miss my previous video on Kennedy half-dollar coins. The Kennedy half-dollar is another fascinating part of U.S. coinage history, and in that video I break down which Kennedy half-dollars are rare, which ones are valuable, and why collectors search for them today. Make sure to watch it right after this video so you don't miss out on important details that could help you discover another valuable coin. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you'll always stay updated on the most valuable coins, rare dimes, half-dollars, quarters, and cents, and you'll never miss the chance to learn about hidden treasures that could be sitting in your change or coin jar right now. So go watch my previous video on Kennedy half-dollars, hit that subscribe button, and keep discovering the true value of U.S. coins.